I think schools have to be careful that they stay relevant, that they're not blockbusters. Yeah, I think leaders, school leaders and parents have to be braver. And, if it goes back to institutions, our generation, my generation, oh, the school system is broken, it doesn't work, it's a different time. And then the moment you say, okay, well, we're not going to be grading exams, or no, 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 no. Well, they need grades for university. No, 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 no. How else do we know that they're learning? So we can't just put this on school leaders and, education. It's up to parents and corporate leaders.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dean Van Leeuwen, and I'm delighted to be leading today's session of Elephants in the Boardroom podcast with my co-host, Graeme Codrington. Graeme and I spend a lot of our time exploring what we call grey elephants, high-impact, visible forces of change that are already in the room, but largely ignored, and these forces are already shaping the world, and ones which leaders, boards, and organizations often struggle to respond to with enough urgency and imagination. Now, grey elephants are not just threats or risks. They are forces of progress, creating new markets, new behaviors, new expectations, new technologies, and new forms of leadership. Our research is showing that every 100 years or so, the world enters a sharp transformation, and that's where we are now. History shows us that leaders who are tuned to these forces of progress have a great opportunity to shape and even create the future. The real question is not simply what could go wrong, it's what could these forces of progress, these grey elephants, make possible. And that's the spirit of today's conversation. It's not doom-mongering, it's not trend theatre, it's not listing scary headlines. It's about practical, honest conversations about the big forces shaping the future and what they mean for leadership, strategy, culture, and growth. So before we jump in, I just want a quick thank you to our sponsor, Achilles. Achilles delivers advanced risk monitoring for suppliers and third parties, helping organizations tackle climate change, uphold human rights, and lead on health, safety, and compliance, all through a connected global network. So for any organization or leader looking to build more anti-fragility, resilience, responsible and transparent supply chains, please do visit achilles.com. So, Graeme, what's been on your grey elephant radar recently?
Well, Dean, after that wonderful explanation of what our elephants in the boardroom are, I'm a little bit nervous that I'm going to break the rules straight away, because you said it's not about fear-mongering or headline chasing. But my word, at the beginning of May 2026, it's quite difficult to look at any news outlet or switch on one of the big media TV news bulletins and not be a little bit afraid of what's happening in the world at the moment. So I'm going to do my best with your help, because what I've been thinking about, and it does actually link to the work that our sponsor Achilles does, is the fact that most of the world's supply chains have actually been optimized over the last few decades. And I suppose the shorthand is the just-in-time approach. So we don't keep large warehouses of excess stock and capacity. And I think this has impacted us. I know through COVID, a number of people got into trouble, a number of industries. I had a problem with one of my cars and had to wait weeks for a part to come, because they don't keep enough parts in South Africa where my car is, and they had to bring it in from the factory that makes it, which was somewhere in Southeast Asia. And there was shipping disruption and issues. And of course now, in May of 2026, we've got the Straits of Hormuz, which if nobody knew where that was before, we all know now. And it's everything. It's not just petrol and diesel and oil that's being impacted, but it's issues of fertilizer. I was working with one of our clients yesterday who's having an absolute disastrous time. They're a fish restaurant, and they just calamari, for whatever reason, has been completely messed up all around the world. Now, granted, something like calamari you can't stockpile for months and months. That's not the point. You want it fresh on your plate. But I think that for me, what I'm seeing is what we call in our grey elephant radar world the big squeeze. And the big squeeze is when everything just feels more difficult to come by, where everything feels like it's going to cost just a little bit more, where we even get a little bit nervous about whether we're going to have food, whether we're going to have power, petrol, diesel, whatever that may be, or the parts that we need to keep our business running, or the supplies that we need to keep our lives ticking over. So that's the headline chasing, fear mongering side. What's the opportunity side? Well, maybe, Dean, let me just hand over to you then, and we can sort of brainstorm together where the opportunity in this lies. But I think there's a huge lesson at the moment to just have a little bit of excess capacity in whatever systems your business is part of.
Yeah, Graham, I like the way you've positioned that. I mean, there's a lot that we can be scared about there. And that's the thing about these grey elephants. They are big, they are scary, but there's the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's about changing that mindset. It's about flipping it and thinking, well, yes, these can be risks and big threats, but they're also forces of progress. They're also the forces that are radically changing our ways of work. So how do we turn this into an opportunity? And I agree with you. I think for too long, that sort of just-in-time principle has become indoctrinated within how businesses are run because it's efficient. But in a world where supply chains are breaking, where they're brittle, where they are fragile, having a just-in-time system makes you vulnerable. Obvious thing is to then think, well, how do we adjust our business and our business model to deal with that fragility? So things like rather than offshoring, onshoring, or friendshoring, bringing operations supply chains slightly closer home so that you're not relying on these massive global supply chains. Yeah, building closer relationships with your suppliers would be another option. Stockpiling, having slightly more stockpiling. Understanding, possibly using AI to understand where those really fragile points in your supply chain exist, and then using those fragile points and building stock around those areas or strengthening those areas of the supply chain. So, to perhaps give Achilles a bit of a punch here, they can help to identify where those vulnerabilities in your supply chain exist, understand those vulnerabilities better, and then, Graeme, as you say, then moving away from this just-in-time principle, been able to, Graeme, we use that word anti-fragile or anti-fragility. Maybe you can share a bit about anti-fragile, the concept, the term, and what it means. Because I think anti-fragility is a really important way to think about supply chains in the future.
Yeah, on our grey elephant radar, we obviously identify all of these threats, but with each of the threats, in this case, the threat of a big squeeze, whatever that big squeeze might mean, it might not be a supply chain big squeeze, it might be an inflationary big squeeze, or it might be a lack of access to a resource big squeeze for you. But the flip side of each of the threats, or each of the big elephant in the room forces that are coming our way, there's always a flip side. And the flip side is what you would build into your business in order to make sure that you are not just capable of dealing with the shock or the hit of a threat, but actually see the opportunity that comes with it. And we love the idea of anti-fragility. We need to give credit to Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote a book of that name over 10 years ago. But it's quite a dense book in terms of, it's sort of a data analytics type book. And we think the topic is a lot more elegant, and the concept is much more important than being stuck in kind of a data-driven book. The concept is very simple. We know what fragility is. If something is fragile, if it takes a hit, it's going to break. And then we think that the opposite of that is that if you take a hit, you can get knocked down, you can get yourself back up again, dust yourself off and keep going. But that's really resilience. It's not the opposite of fragility. It's just being capable of getting going again. I'm sure you are like Dean and myself. You're a little bit tired of getting knocked down, even if you can get back up again. I mean, resilience is all well and good, but like we keep getting knocked down and it feels a little bit wearying at the moment. So anti-fragility takes one step further and says, well, is there a system that we can see? Are there systems around us that we can see that when they take a hit, they get stronger? When they're disrupted, they get better? And the answer is yes. I mean, literally, your own body is one of those. I mean, literally, the way you get physically stronger is by actually breaking down your muscles. Not too much. If you overdo it, then the fragility kicks in, you get injured. But if you do your gymming or your training right, you'll feel sore. Your muscles will literally have had micro tears in them. You take a moment for recovery, and keep that thought in your head for a second. You take a moment for recovery, like at 25. You don't do leg day twice in a row, but your body recovers, and the recovery makes you stronger. That's literally how your body works. And then we can look in nature and we can see similar patterns. And then actually we can look in many organizations and realize this is part of how you prepare yourself for disruption. Is you build a little bit of excess capacity. That's part of anti-fragility. You definitely switch on your future focus so that you can see disruption coming before it slaps you in the face. That's another part of it. And there's a whole lot of other things you can look at our, we'll put a link to a white paper that our team has written about anti-fragility. You can download it and read more for yourself. But in this case of supply chain disruption, I think excess capacity, Dean, is the lesson to learn that helps us to be anti-fragile. And the excess capacity is, you've mentioned a few things that I suppose are fairly obvious and would just be strategic and financial decisions a company would need to make. But the other side of that excess capacity is the capacity to not merely focus on our existing markets, our existing products and services to those existing markets. But let's give a practical example. BYD, the electric car manufacturer in China, seems to have been ready for this, because I am seeing BYD adverts all over, everywhere. I'm seeing BYD, I've tried to have a look at some of their recent announcements. They are ramping up their production. They've just made announcements about new manufacturing hubs across Africa. And so BYD have said, oh, well, I wonder what would happen if the fuel price went through the roof and it became very, very expensive to drive a car that needs diesel or petrol or gas in it. Oh, maybe an electric car would be an option. And it's almost as if the marketing team had this little marketing campaign, and the manufacturing team had an expansion campaign available. This is excess capacity. You didn't use it, but you had enough capacity to build this so that if there was at any stage an issue with global oil supplies, you would know which button, a big green button in BYD head office, and you smack that button and the whole machine bursts into life. And so we're going to see a lot of people struggle over these weeks and months of Middle Eastern war and disruption. But I think we're going to see lots of companies that, Dean, exactly what you were saying, leaders who are ready for the moment of disruption, ready to take advantage of the disruption. And that's, I think, an even better way to prepare for disruption. It isn't just about fixing what's broken in your system. It's about ready for what happens next if your system breaks.
Absolutely, Graeme, and I love how you described that. And it's really about understanding these forces of progress, recognizing, evaluating, recognizing what they mean for your business and for your industry, and then being prepared for when they appear. Because if a grey elephant appears and you're not prepared, well, it's too late. So let me share what's been on my radar over the last month. What I've been picking up on my radar is something called cognitive surrender, and it sits under the intelligent advances. It's about what happens when we stop using AI to support our thinking and start allowing it to think for us. So we've seen versions of this before. Calculators helped us with math, GPS helped us to navigate, and Google has helped us to find information. This is all really useful and it's all progress, but each comes with a cost. And that's the thing, grey elephant forces, these forces of progress always have a positive and a negative side effect. And we become more likely to trust the calculator or follow the navigation blue line blindly. AI takes us further. It gives us a polished, confident answer, and that confidence is seductive. Now, the Economist reported on a recent study and they said when people use AI and AI was right, they performed better. Okay, so that's great, that's obvious. But when AI was wrong, they performed worse than people who relied solely on their own judgment. And the thing is, they stopped challenging it. So, Grant, do you want to say something?
Well, I want to just add exactly on this. The Guardian reported just last week on a survey which did almost what this has done, but I think this will help to cement the point you're making, Dean. And then we can chat about the implications. There was a medical study done. The question was, should AI be used for medical advice? Can it replace doctors? Came up with a set of 33 different scenarios that a normal individual might experience, medical problems that are not easy to diagnose. And then they went to 100 medical professionals. These are doctors, surgeons, nurses, whatever, people who had medical knowledge. They gave them these scenarios and they said, knowing only this information in the scenario. So, for example, I've got a tingling in my left arm and my vision is going blurry and I'm tasting almonds in my mouth, Is there a problem or, what do I need to do next? And when these medical professionals took the scenarios, put it into AI, and got the results, there was about a 94% accuracy and it gave good advice. And all the doctors said, look, 94% accuracy is really good enough for a sort of emergency situation. But now, Dean, this was the clever part of the research, right? You don't stop there. They then took the same 33 scenarios and went to 100 random individuals on the street, no medical training. What do you think happened with the AI results at that point? I mean, 94% accuracy then, what do you suspect happened?
Probably dropped dramatically.
Absolutely dramatically. This isn't this week's quiz, but it would have been a good quiz question. But it dropped down into the low 30%. In other words, dangerously bad. And you can see immediately, Dean, why I think this is going to be a landmark study that people are going to quote quite a lot. In the hands of an expert, AI is valuable. So then they try to work out what happened, right? And just medical professionals have a way of describing it. My vision is going blurry, might be how I describe it, but the doctor would say, in my left eye, I'm getting, my far-sighted vision is going. Or I might say my arm is tingling, but the doctor will say, it will give more information. And it's that extra, like 2 or 3% of slightly more detailed medical information that allowed the doctor to then prompt the tool more effectively and therefore get a better result. And I think that's the sort of flip side of what you've just said. When AI gets it right, and when an expert prompts it in order to get a good result, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. In the hands of an expert, it becomes an expert tool. But the rest of us, we now think we're Dr. Google, and we just don't know that we're getting about 30% accuracy, which means it's damn dangerous. Anyway, I thought that you might be interested in that because I think it just adds powerfully to the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be increasingly become an important grey elephant for leaders to tackle. Because if we're not thinking carefully about it, it's going to be one of those elephants that start to stampede and trip us up. Because there's a real danger that everyone is an expert and then no one is an expert. So I think the question that we need to be asking is, how do we stop people becoming intellectually passive? And I think this links into structural, other grey elephant, structural fragmentation. And because work is a place where people learn judgment. They learn through experiences, challenges, debates, mistakes, mentoring, apprenticeship. And if AI starts doing too much of the thinking layer for us, then the institution of work begins to change and not necessarily for the better. The analyst becomes an editor of machine output. The manager relies on summaries instead of understanding. The organization gets faster, but potentially thinner in the output that they're delivering. So cognitive resistance and I think cognitive surrender are important, leadership and boardroom elephants for us to be thinking about. And this means, I think, critical thinking, curiosity, challenging, even if you're not an expert, but critical thinking and curiosity are going to be so important in this new world of work. If you're just blindly following what AI is telling you, there are some real pitfalls to that.
I absolutely agree, Dean. And I think, we initially thought the danger of this AI era is that machines start to think like us and all the implications that that might have. But I actually think the initial danger is that we begin to think like the machines instead. And I love this label of cognitive surrender. And I think in the end, the opportunity here is for companies to spend a little bit of time, and this probably links our two themes today together, because you need a little bit of excess capacity. If everybody in your team is needing 100% of their time to only do the job they have to do, you don't have time to upgrade people's thinking skills and critical thinking. You don't have time to give them a little bit of a space to experiment with AI and work out how they use it best or not. So everybody just tries to look for the cheat sheet and the shortcut codes, and that's where we get into a mess. But if you've got a little bit of time to help upgrade your people's thinking skills, their critical thinking skills, teach them about cognitive bias. You know what? It's going to be like when the calculators came to schools in the 1980s and 90s. It's not going to dumb us down. It's actually going to raise the base. And that's what happened in schools with calculators, is it didn't dumb the dumb kids down. What it did is allowed everybody to have access to a higher base level of understanding algebra and geometry and so on. And the mathematics that kids do in schools today is much more advanced than when you and I were at school. And Dean, and so I think that this is the promise, or at least the invitation of the AI age, is not to surrender our thinking to the machine, but rather use the machine as a sparring partner, as a thinking partner, to help us elevate our own thinking, and realize that we still need experts who use the experts' tools expertly. Is a sentence. But I think this is a great thing for people to focus on, and maybe a different way for people to be thinking about how they engage with AI, or as we call it, intelligent advances, IA, in the background. Nice one.
So I think the next question following on from this is really, how do leaders build bionic organizations, ones that are AI enabled, but still deeply human in the way they think, challenge, and decide. So we've written a paper which is about how you build bionic organizations, a white paper on this. And very interestingly, that we identified 5 enablers. And only one of the enablers was AI, IT driven. The other 4 are people enablers. So we'll put the link to that document into the comments below, and have a look at that. 5 enablers that help you to build a bionic organization.
It's Q2 of 2026, people. If you are a loyal listener to Elephants in the Boardroom, this month you have homework. You've got the anti-fragility white paper and the bionic white paper. Make sure you read them. There will be a pop quiz for listeners in the next episode. All of those details in the show notes as usual.
Right, Graeme, so it's my turn to ask the quiz question this month. Are you ready?
I'm always ready, but you have a gleam in your eye this month, Dean, so I'm nervous. Off we go. Go for it. Let's see how I do.
Well, I'm going to stick with the sort of AI trend here. And so according to Microsoft's 2025 Work Trend Index, what percentage of leaders expect to use digital labor to expand their workforce in the next 12 to 18 months? A, 42%, B, 61%, C, 82%, and D, 94%.
If you had given me E 100%, I might have been tempted. So I think the number is high. But Dean, and this is where I think there might be an interesting point, because this is about how CEOs are self-reporting. And most CEOs have got a very interesting balancing act at the moment. For sure, they are all thinking in their quiet moments that this is an easy win, right? The shareholders are desperate for returns. There's only two ways to get returns: increase your revenue, decrease your costs. I mean, that's it, right? And that's mainly what a CEO is focused on. And of course, this AI revolution is the promise of a lifetime to reduce your human resource cost. But of course, the smart CEO realizes that's a once and done. You might be cutting muscle instead of fat, blah, blah, blah. And so there's this very fine line of, do they do it or don't they do it? But do they talk about it or not? Most of the clients we are working with, we know for sure that they really would hope that digital tools and digital resources will help them with their businesses, but they don't want to spook their own employees. And so it's a big game being played in the corporate world at the moment. I'm not a fan. So for me, the answer's probably 42% feels low. But if it's self-reported, I think that a whole lot of CEOs might have basically just lied. I'll just call it for what it is, and given a low number because they are not prepared to actually say what they have in mind. Or it could be the high number because that's what they want the shareholders to hear. So like weirdly, I'm caught between whatever the top number was, 94, and the bottom number, 46. I'm caught between those two. So it's one of those two, and I'm going to go for 50-50. Anyway, give us the answer. I'm caught between those two. If it's one of the others, then I'm completely wrong.
The answer is 82%. So I think they're being a little bit more honest, but probably not, because I agree with that. I think probably 100% of CEOs are thinking about how do we make digital labor part of our workforce. You're either lying or you're not on top of your game.
That's a fascinating piece of research, and obviously one of the things, if you follow along, is Dean and my, especially our LinkedIn profiles, again, links in the show notes. We try and keep up with this research, not just to parrot it to you, and not just there's another piece of research, but what we try and do is get behind the scenes of what is this research actually asking, and then what are the answers actually showing us, and follow on Dean's LinkedIn profile for more insights to that Microsoft survey.
So Graeme, I believe you interviewed one of our colleagues, Jude, for this episode. Do you want to just tell the audience a little bit about it?
Absolutely. Dean, Jude Fulston, who is our digital director at Tomorrow Today, and also has responsibility for the work that we do with schools and parents. And we do quite a lot of work actually with schools and parents. We found over the years that whenever we were in a big corporate environment and we had finished one of our keynote presentations or workshops and we went to a general Q&A, the first question that was always asked is, well, thank you for all of this information about the changing world. I have a 16-year-old, what should she study at varsity, or should she even go to university? And there was this constant thought about our children, how they should be educated. And Jude has really picked that up for us over the last few years and become a global expert on it, traveling to future schools in Barcelona and running her own podcast called Future Smart Parent. And Jude happened to be in town. We're a virtual team and we don't often get to be in the same physical space as each other, but she was in town for some work with a client, and I dragged her into the studio here in Johannesburg, and we had a wonderful conversation about the future of education, about the things that every parent and teacher and even every business leader needs to be thinking about. Is the school system actually preparing kids for the world that they're about to come into? And we applied another one of our models, one of our frameworks for future thinking at Tomorrow Today, the TIDES model of change, and we looked at technology, institutional change, demographics, the environment, and social values. Those are the tides of change and how those apply to schools. And we picked up this AI conversation as well. You'll see Jude is a mine of information in this space, the future of education and parenting. And I'm sure that you will enjoy the conversation too. We'll get to that straight after this break.
Elephants in the Boardroom is proudly brought to you by our partners at Achilles. As a leader in sustainable global risk management for businesses and their supply chains, Achilles helps the world's largest companies build and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent business practices. While we explore the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles is at the forefront guiding businesses through the risks and the opportunities these grey elephants present. If you're interested in how change impacts your supply chain or ESG strategy, it's worth connecting with Achilles. Visit achilles.com to learn more.
So thanks for joining us. Jude, this does feel a bit weird for a number of reasons. If you're watching the video, we are very close together because we're actually in a makeshift green screen studio, not in some beautiful library. Anyway, if you're watching online, you can have a little bit of fun along with us. But thank you for taking the time. As we've said, you've been working with Tomorrow Today for years and years and years. And a number of years ago, we realized as Tomorrow Today that our business clients were very concerned, obviously, about their families and their kids. When did you realize that you were not going to be, let's do it as normal family and education was just going to be ticking boxes?
I blame you completely, Graeme. The day that you and I were having a meeting on a Skype call and my daughter Layla was crawling around me and you were telling me how you were helping your daughters outsource their homework. That was before there was a gig economy, Fiverr, nothing. And it was that moment that I realized we're going to have to do something different to how it was for us. And then obviously fast forward to COVID. And as you know, I was diagnosed with breast cancer literally a few weeks before. And with COVID schooling, it all just came crashing down on us. I was dealing with chemo. We were dealing with COVID, which you remember was so scary for all of us. And then I was also dealing with the worksheets that the schools were sending home for my kids. They were 7 and 9 or 10 at the time, and it was impossible. And we took the decision then to take the year off schooling, let them play, focus on their well-being, their mental well-being, and safety. And the rest was kind of history. We took a very alternative route, tried a whole bunch of different things. We are back at mainstream now, but we've done everything in between.
And I think that is probably the story that can be told about Tomorrow Today over the years. We're over 20 years old now, and we've always tried to live what we say.
Mm-hmm.
We're not people who sort of come up with theoretical models and then hope somebody buys them from us and hope they work. We really try and when we see something changing in the world, we try and say, well, what would the personal implications be? What would the family implications be? How would it impact our business? And that's led us to do crazy things. For example, all of our salaries in our business are on a Google spreadsheet that everybody's got access to. Everybody knows what everybody earns. It's not quite a socialist communist company, but it's also not a typical capitalist company either. So that's one example. And then probably my daughters, and if they listen to this podcast, will roll their eyes because we experiment as a family. And, you got to be careful saying I experimented on my children, but we experimented by maybe doing things that others hadn't done or doing things in a way that hadn't been done before and learning what works and what doesn't work and trying stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to go back to Graeme and I sitting quite closely together because we're a virtual company. So if I see Graeme once a year, it's a lot. And so we're not used to this. I mean, I don't know, you haven't met Jeanette in the team yet?
Literally haven't met one of our team members.
And I agree with it sounds difficult to say I'm experimenting on my kids. And people would often ask us that, well, don't you feel bad? What about? And my response was quite easy. It was like, well, I think it's more dangerous not to try different things with our kids because their whole life is going to be change and trying new things.
Okay, so that's who we are and why we do what we do. But let's talk about a focus that I know is your passion at the moment, and that is the future of education and how we shift it. And we're going to take listeners behind the scenes now. We have a model called the TIDES model of change. And it kind of it's an acronym. TIDES is technology, institutional change, demographics, the environment, and social values. We'll unpack those in a second. And it kind of is an additional layer to our grey elephant radar, because this is the tides are where we are looking for disruption. So it's a model that tells us these 5 areas are where structural change comes from. So what we thought might be interesting for you to listen in on is, as Jude and I had kind of just bounced this around, to say, can tides help us think about what the future of education should look like? So Jude, let's start with technology. It's the obvious place to start. There's so much technology going around. How do we take the technology disruption lens, and what questions should we be asking?
Well, I think it's just really important to frame what education looks like, the access to technology that we have. We're moving from the information age where information, teachers were the people that had access to that information. That has obviously changed dramatically now, where everyone has access to information, and it's now more about the connection, right? And belonging. But are schools keeping up with that? And how do we help them access the technology that will allow them to connect rather than carry on being deliverers of content, and to help teachers see themselves still as the authorities in their subject expertise, but to also support them with the transition from being someone who had access to all of that information to not. AI is obviously everywhere. Any teacher who thinks that the students, especially high school, are not using AI,
Yeah.
they are.
They are.
They know more than most teachers. And I think if we look at, when I was at school, teachers knew everything. What the teacher said was what happened, and you would never, ever question the teacher. But now, how can the kids not question the teacher? Because a teacher cannot know everything. And I think we have to help teachers get away from that mindset of having to have all the answers, to being curious. And, we always say, Graeme, the questions are now often more important than the answers. So, yeah, technology and the changes that technology has brought allows teachers to connect more. And we need to be looking at what technology means. It's not, AI is not the story. It's
Agreed.
about the belonging and
Yeah.
and everything that AI lets education do.
And for me, that's the powerful insight here. The insight is, what is the thing that used to be your competitive advantage,
Yeah.
your secret sauce? And let's give a business analogy if people are struggling to understand why I'm so passionate about this conversation. Let's say you're a car dealership and you're selling cars. 30 years ago, the salespeople on the floor of your dealership needed to be petrol heads. They needed to be the person who can say, well, it's a 12V and that's what it means, and it's got this torque and it's got that, and its fuel is this, and the paint color is that, and it's a very technical sale, and it's a person who knows the specs and stats of the car. But there cannot be a person these days who walks into a car dealership who doesn't know that, who hasn't done the comparison between your entry level and the other brand's entry level. And so what would be the skill set that a car salesman needs today? It's not the specifications. It's not the statistics and the numbers. It's a different skill set. And there's maybe more emotional intelligence. There's maybe more communication skills. There's maybe more listening skills than there used to be. And so for me, if your secret sauce or the key asset has changed, that's a great question to ask. And then maybe the other question, and now we can bring it back to schools if teachers are listening. If AI could tutor your child, let's say this is a scenario, which bits would you not want the AI to do? And that, I think, is the question.
Yeah.
And it might be different in different subjects. It might be different with different ages of child. It might be different for different learning styles. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, but I do think it's the right question. But it's a question everybody in every business can ask.
And it goes back to being human and that uniqueness that we need to really build up in our students. So going back to the car salesman example, it's about having passion. If you go and someone loves cars so much that they're going to sell you anything because they love it so much, that is part of their uniqueness, and that needs to be developed, right? Or honored.
And I love that it helps you be more human. The last month's interview with Xavier Coyne, really one of the last things he said in that interview, if you didn't listen to it, go back. It was a really good one. on the podcast. I asked him, what are you most excited that today's young people will bring to the world? And he said that we will use technology to become more human. And I think for me, that's the exciting piece about looking at technology. But let's keep moving, because the I is about institutional shifts. And institutions are all the ways in which we group ourselves together. So a family would be an institution, a country would be an institution, but of course a school would be an institution as well. And well, I can't think of any institution in the world that is not being disrupted right now. But my word, educational institutions, from preschool through primary and high into college and university, there's disruption at every level. Admin disruption in the background, stakeholder disruption in the foreground, and educational disruption all the way through. What have you seen from your position as an education specialist, but then also a parent, in terms of how schools should be thinking about institutional shift?
So I think that schools need to really be considering not just trying to change and keep up, but really what is our role in educating our children? Is it delivering content, or is it more than that? And I think it's that schools are going to become hubs of connection, human connection, and learning experiences, rather than this sort of authoritarian, which a lot of schools still are. I really think that we have to lean into how can our schools be that safe space for learning to happen with diversity and with different experiences. So when we were doing COVID unschooling, I found a organization called Learn Life. They're in Barcelona, and we signed my daughter up. My son was too young for screen concentration, but it was everything that I wanted, knowing the work that we do and what we were preparing our kids for the future. They were everything that I was looking for, except for they were in Barcelona. At the beginning of last year, I was lucky enough to go over and actually experience them in person. And Graeme, there it is all relationship based, curiosity driven, but still with a framework for learning to take place. So they're not saying forget all the pedagogy that we've learned, but it's saying, well, what works now in 2026 and going forward, and what doesn't? What can we remove? What can we unlearn? What can we relearn? And you walk into the Learn Life hub and you see these teenagers who are so passionate about learning. I saw about 4 or 5, there must have been about 16, and they were doing maths on a whiteboard. I wish I could have captured the moment, their levels of excitement. They were explaining, they were challenging. There wasn't a learning guide or a teacher in sight. They were just cracking on with their learning because they loved it, and they had been given the tools to learn and be curious and to make mistakes and to learn and to make mistakes. There was no pressure of, there's no grades. So what they do, they help these students create learning portfolios. So you don't leave there with an A aggregate, but you have a learning portfolio. So communication, well, you show the emails that you sent to a corporate looking for work or whatever. Then you build a website for your project, and you're coding all of a sudden. On Fridays, they have these sessions where if I've got a problem with you as either my learning guide or my peer, we're going to have a talk about it. It's a facilitated conversation, but these children or these teenagers are learning to have these really difficult conversations. Can you imagine a world where we have people in the workplace knowing how to have conversations, how to give feedback and receive feedback? I get very passionate about these different models, and Learn Life's not the only one. There's so many different models popping up around, trying new ways of learning. But to go back, I think schools, as big as the ship seems to never sink, I think schools have to be careful that they stay relevant, that they're not blockbusters. Yeah, I think leaders, school leaders and parents have to be braver. And, if it goes back to institutions, our generation, my generation, oh, the school system is broken, it doesn't work, it's a different time. And then the moment you say, okay, well, we're not going to be grading exams, or no, well, they need grades for university. No, they how else do we know that they're learning? So we can't just put this on school leaders and, education. It's up to parents and corporate leaders to go. And I know that that's happening more, where you don't necessarily have to have a university degree, but yeah.
No, and I think that's precisely why institutional change is a key part of our model. because what technology does is it unlocks new assets. So it changes the school from being a place where you've got the authority with the existing knowledge who must transfer it to you. Now it can become a learning partner. We move away from standardization being the best approach to personalization being possible. Technology unlocks pathways of possibility, but institutional change, as part of our model, says, but then what are some of the key structures? And to, again, make it a one-liner simple, what are you measuring and what does what you measure tell you? And so why are you measuring it?
Yeah.
And if we are brave enough to ask that question, you can see how that flows into educational changes. No easy answers, no one-size-fits-all solutions. This is going to be a lot of experimentation over the next 2 years. But for me, I'm excited that there's so much change happening in the world that it's now more dangerous to not experiment on our kids than it is to experiment.
Yep.
The D in our model is for demographics. And demographics has got to do with everything from living longer, getting married later, having fewer children, more migration around the world, all those things. But I suppose for both of us, Jude, if we look at just one aspect of demographics, which is just how people, both you and I, because of our own selves and our children, for us, the issue of neurodiversity is a key part of demographics. Obviously, in the workplace, people are measuring this a little bit more now. We're a lot more alert to mental health, to differences in well-being and how people get well-being. I think people are more comfortable as adults saying, I have ADD, this is what it means. I'm on the spectrum, that's what that means. But what should schools understand more about neurodiversity? And again, we can refer back a few months ago, we did a fantastic interview on the podcast with Dr. Sarah Babb, who's bringing this into higher education and leadership. But what do you think schools should do differently?
I think schools need to acknowledge the power of neurodiversity or neuroinclusion brings to their classrooms and to the learning. And my daughter is dyslexic. And when they were talking about strengths at school, she said one of her strengths is dyslexic thinking. And the response to that from her peers and perhaps the facilitator was, no, that's not a strength, that is a weakness. So there's education to happen to equip educators with understanding the strengths and also what it means for the student and where it helps their learning and where it doesn't help the learning. Because as much as it does bring superpowers, it is also, we can't deny that it can be really difficult, especially in a school learning environment. So I think schools need to invest in educating their staff so that they can understand. This is not a fault of the teachers. They just don't know what they don't know sometimes. They know what they're dealing with, but this is not a parenting, and I suppose this goes to demographics. This is not a parenting versus teachers thing. We're a system and we have got to work on this together.
And where we find ourselves, and again, the technology and institutional systems, and you can see now how the model starts to build itself up. It says we now have the technology, we can build an institution that doesn't reward compliance and standardization. It rewards learning and personalization, that it doesn't require everybody to fit into a pathway because we've got tools and technologies that allow different people to engage in different ways. So obviously there's lots more that we could talk about, including people in their 60s going back to school and education being a lifelong thing rather than something that's one and done before you're 18. But let's keep moving. The E in our model is for the environment, for natural resources, and for the way in which we look after the planet and the way in which the planet apparently looks like it's fighting back at the moment. So what are some of the questions that schools should be asking in this space of the E of our model?
I think there's a few things. I think we seriously need to be asking ourselves, are we educating our children because this is how we've always known it and they need to know certain things, or are we doing this to prepare them to contribute to society and to be good humans? We need to be asking schools if they're providing the right environment. Is it a safe environment? Every single school that you go to will be saying, Of course, children need to make mistakes for them to learn. I don't know, give me one example in a school where it's okay to make a mistake. There's not many. So it's fear-based learning, in my opinion, for the majority. And we can't learn like that. The only way we're going to get a better world is when our, youth are empowered to make it better. And if we're not empowering them now, then when? Because they're going to lose their passion, and then it's a disaster.
And I think I'm very excited as I engage with young people around the world, including my own children, that it is this issue of climate change and the change of the natural environment and the protection of the planet itself and the other beings that share this planet with us, that has become a generational focus. And it allows us to support them in saying, you are the future. And you can help us build a world that is fit for the future. And that, I suppose, flows nicely, and that's the way the model works, into the issue of social values. The first four, technology, institutional change, demographics, environmental issues, those are coming whether you like it or not. But the fifth part of our model, and this maybe differentiates it from other similar strategy models, is that we then ask the question, but do you like it? And that's what we mean by social values. Is society ready for this change? Are we going to embrace it or resist it? And that is a question that's often ignored. Obviously, there's always for and against arguments. There's always going to be somebody who says, I want the change, and somebody says, I don't. So it's not quite as simple as that. But it is about what do we value and what are we prepared to put energy into changing. And for me, I actually do think there's a lot of energy. We are not anti-school, and I hope that hasn't come across at all. You've put your kids back into mainstream school, and with the frustrations, but enjoying it, and I think being rewarded for it.
Absolutely. And the reason why we've sent, so here's a funny thing, the reason why we've sent them back is for that sense of belonging. They wanted to play sport, they wanted to be in a team, later wanted to be in the choir. So it was that sense of belonging. And some of her teachers look at me like I'm absolutely mad when I'm like, when it's a teacher parent feedback and they're telling me how well she's doing. And she really is. They really are thriving, how well she's doing and her grades. And I'm like, I don't really worry about the grades.
And for me, I'm excited that, look, let's be honest, right? Teachers are not doing it for fame and fortune, right? Almost all of them are professionally qualified to postgrad level. And if they'd gone into corporate, would have earned way more money than they do. So they're not doing it for the money. They're not doing it, as I say, for the fame and the acclaim. Unfortunately, we don't give enough fame and acclaim to teachers in society. So we are wanting to do the opposite today of what a lot of people do, which is to bash schools. We're saying, no, we see a community that is ready for the future because it's got all the ingredients you need to be anti-fragile in the midst of chaos. You've got natural change happening all the time. New students coming every year, community change. You've got natural community and connection, right? We believe that connection is going to be the heart of future schools. And that even thinking about your property and facilities and what you bring on top, getting parents together on that, there's going to be a whole different way of thinking about what a school actually physically is. But then it goes further than that. It's about what do we measure? And I think, again, schools are very good at measuring certain things. If they just said, well, what else could we measure? And what measurements really matter, and stop measuring the things that don't matter, I think you can make very quick changes that most teachers would absolutely love because they know what needs to be done. It isn't data transfer anymore. It's character building and future shaping.
And as you say, no teacher, because they want to deliver content, they are there because they have hope and they see the potential in students. And I think we've got to learn to trust teachers. They know what they're doing. They have this gift of working with children, and we just need to experiment again, right? We just need to let them try different things. We're going to lose, already there's a teacher crisis, right? And if we don't make these changes, we're not, society I don't think is, we know that it's not catching up fast enough. It's not keeping up fast enough, parents and the systems. But if we don't, we're going to lose, we are losing the brilliant teachers. So yeah, it's urgent. It really is urgent.
It is. And our time is nearly at an end. And I know maybe everybody's saying, oh, so what are the three things that we should do? There aren't simple, easy solutions. This is a big structural problem. And most teachers and schools are stuck in structural systems. either public or private. There's entire infrastructure that flows all the way from corporate sponsors of university courses to entrance exams for universities to school leaver certificates. We understand that there's a cascading level of complexity to changing the school system. But we also believe that there's enough flexibility inside any classroom, any school, any dining room of any family to say, we are going to make a little shift in a little direction. Maybe a technology shift. We're going to do something different, like I did 15 years ago, encouraging my daughters to sort of outsource a little bit of homework or integrate AI these days. So technology. On an institutional side, we're maybe just going to ask the question, what are we measuring and why are we measuring it? And maybe as a parent, you're going to just step back and say, I want to measure something about my child's character or friendship groups or joy at school. Not throwing everything else out, but just adding an additional 1 or 2 measurements and making sure you just go after that and chase it. On the demographic side, we talked about neurodiversity. What would you say would be like an easy win for schools to just think about neurodiversity a little bit more than they do?
We've got the technology. It doesn't now take teachers an extra hour to customize lesson plans. So use the technology, make it so that your neurodiverse children can learn, and that's an easy win.
I think so. And this is what we're wanting to leave you with, is there are easy wins available here. Think about what you could do to make your school campus a little bit more sustainable for the E side of it. And then for you, whether you're a parent, a teacher, an educator, administrator, from a social values perspective, I think we're all aligned. And we know what we want. We know where we've got to go. And we've now just got to encourage each other and form communities of change. Saying that, Jude, how can people get hold of you if they're interested in the type of resources that you make available for these school communities?
Yeah, you can email me, jude@tomorrowtodayglobal.com. I share resources on LinkedIn and Instagram, so connect with me there. I'm always up for a conversation and to share my learnings and to hear what it's like in schools, what teachers are facing, what students are facing, and what parents are dealing with. We're in this together.
We are, and Tomorrow Today is definitely in this together with you. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a student, we have to sort education out so that we can future-proof our world, ourselves, and our families. Thanks, Jude, for your time.
Thank you.